The following show is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose nor treat any medical condition. Any information or recommendations provided should always be discussed with your healthcare professional. Welcome to the Patient Talks. I'm Physician Assistant Frank Smith. On this week's episode, we're going to discuss the basics of blood pressure. Blood pressure is one of the vital signs that's checked at every medical office visit, which tells you how important it is. And most patients do understand the importance of blood pressure. However, most patients don't really understand what it is we're checking when we do a blood pressure. And a lot of people seem to have a misunderstanding of what the outcomes are if you don't control your blood pressure. So we're going to be covering those today, and we will touch on some of the things that you can do to keep your blood pressure under control. Our circulatory system, which is our heart, our lungs, and all the blood vessels, are a closed loop system. And what that means is when the heart pumps and it sends blood through all of the vessels, there's not an outlet. It comes back to where it starts. And what that means is that the system is essentially pressurized. And when the heart pumps, the pressure has to go up because there's nowhere for that volume of blood to go. And when the heart relaxes, the pressures go back down to the baseline. We call the top number the systolic number and the bottom number the diastolic number. So when you hear top number, bottom number, systolic, diastolic. As far as when we actually check your blood pressure, here's really what's going on. So there is a set amount of pressure within the blood vessels. You have your top number and your bottom number. When we put the cuff on your arm and we pump it up, we usually take it up to 200, 220 at a point that we expect it to be quite a bit higher than whatever the pressure is in those vessels. And that pressure on the outside collapses the vessel and blood can't get through. We let the pressure off on the cuff, and eventually the pressure of that cuff gets slightly under the amount of pressure that's in that artery, and some of the blood can shoot through. And we can hear that when we put our stethoscope on your elbow. As we continue to let the pressure off, as blood's pumping through, eventually we hit a point that the blood doesn't have to pump to get past that blood pressure cuff that's laying on the arm. It's at the same pressure as just the resting pressure in the vessel, and we no longer hear that sound as it shoots through the artery. And that's the bottom number. So that's how we do your systolic blood pressure and your diastolic blood pressure with the blood pressure cuff. We go from we can hear it to where we can no longer hear it. As far as the effects of high blood pressure, a lot of times I've noticed patients get it wrong. They will say things like, I'm afraid I'm going to blow a vessel. And while that actually can happen, it's pretty rare, and it's usually not due to a pressure problem. It's actually due to a defect within the vessel itself. Instead, here's what actually happens with high blood pressure. Our blood has multiple small particles as part of it. It's not just like water. There's particles within our blood. It includes the red blood cells, all the different types of white blood cells, platelets, antibodies, several other particles that flow within our bloodstream. At high pressures, those particles, as they come in contact with the inside of the blood vessel, can actually nick it or scratch it. The analogy that I use with patients a lot of times is if I have a freshly waxed vehicle and I slowly pour 5 gallons of sand on top of the hood, it will just kind of roll off and won't cause any problems. If I take that same 5 gallons of sand and I put it in a sandblaster, I'll peel the paint and I will etch the metal. I will scar the metal. In some ways, that's what happens within high blood pressure, where the particles within blood come through so fast, it nicks and scratches the inside of the vessel. And the big problem with that is our platelets are designed to be kind of sticky. They're designed, like if we have a cut, to stick to the opening and plug it up. When they come in contact with a scratch or a scar on the inside of a vessel, a platelet can stick to it. And then over time, other platelets can stick to that platelet, and it compounds and gets bigger and bigger until that vessel can be completely occluded. When that happens, the tissues that were supplied past that blood vessel are no longer getting blood. For example, a section of your heart or a section of your brain. And that is the most common causes of heart attacks and strokes. As far as what you can do to control your blood pressure, odds are your clinician has already talked to you about this, but I'm going to be likely repeating what they've already said. Diet and exercise, diet and exercise, diet and exercise. It's the truth. On the diet side, in particular, I do want to point out, watch your sodium intake. And I'm sure your clinician has talked to you about that as well. The reason behind it comes straight from chemistry and biology. There's a phrase there that it says, water follows salt, and it's true. When there's a very salty situation, fluid is pulled out of the surrounding things to help dilute it down. Since the circulatory system is a closed system, when we add more fluid into that system, the pressure has to go up. So one of the best things you can do to keep your blood pressure under control is to really watch your salt intake. Modern diets have far, far more sodium on average than our bodies are really designed for. So that's one of the biggest first steps that you can make in helping to control your blood pressure. On the exercise side, there's a couple of things that happen with that. One, with exercise, our blood vessels tend to have a little bit more plasticity. They have a little more give to them. And so whenever you have that surge of blood pressure and the vessel gives slightly, it helps lower the overall effect of the pressure. The other thing too is the weight loss that usually comes along with diet and exercise. The less there is of you, the less vessels there are, therefore there's less pressure needed to get through all of those vessels. So that's why we keep hammering on diet and exercise to control your blood pressure. And that's going to do it for this week's show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I've given you some information that was new to you. If either one of those is true, please click the like and subscribe button down below. I'll be back next week. Until then, get better and make me look good. See you soon.